Summit. Now, we are going to bring a group of change makers to the stage to talk about how packaged food and drink products are evolving to meet consumer demands around health, environmental safety, and social justice. Please join me in welcoming Andrea Ippolito, the CEO and founder of SimpliFed, and a faculty member in the College of Engineering and S.C. Johnson College of Business at Cornell University. And Andrea will moderate the conversation. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much. That's always my secret dream, to have hype music on any place I go to. Well, thank you, Kathy, so much for the introduction. So deeply honored to be here with our today to talk about consumer trends and tackling some of the opportunities and challenges that are in the arena right now. So as you said, my name is Andrea Ippolito, and I'm deeply honored to be moderating today's panel. So just to set the context of why this topic is oh so important for where we're at in this day and age is because right now, while investments in upstream ventures like ag biotech, farm management tools, robotics, cell ag, novel farming has grown significantly over the past decade, investors continue to focus on direct-to-consumer offerings. And just to give the evidence of that, as she mentioned, I'm an engineer and scientist, so you always got to be data-driven. In the last 10 years, up until the first quarter of this year, CBI Insights showcased that there's been over 160 deals in this arena. And less than 10% of those deals have been on the ag side, on the upstream side. The vast majority of those investments have been on the consumer side. And so that sets one of the major themes we're here to talk about today, is that in the food and ag sector is here to stay. And while there might be tectonic shifts, that's where the tidal waves are going right now. And speaking of tidal waves and tailwinds, in New York, hooray, grow New York, we're the leaders in this arena, in this space. There are two key trends that we're observing across the ecosystem that we're going to explore in this panel. The first is the fact that at the onset of the pandemic, starting in March 2020, unfortunately, a lot of farmers saw declines in their business to farm-to-table restaurants or school food programs and other institutions. However, an opportunity is that they're just seeing a massive boom in direct-to-consumer sales, of farmers growing directly to the consumers themselves. And those channels are continuously being built out, along with the food and delivery services that we continue seeing in this arena. So, today's panel, we're going to explore a number of different topics in the consumer area, but I just wanted to set that context because of the tailwinds that we're all experiencing right now in this industry. So we're going to go through a series of questions with our panelists, who I'm going to have introduce themselves in the next couple minutes. And then at the end, we're going to have about 10-15 minutes of Q&A. So those participating online, start to get those questions in. My trusted partner in crime, Lee, will be serving up those questions at the end. So, with that, beyond excited to introduce our panelists. So I'm actually going to start with Catia in the middle, and then we'll go to Doug and add with Somak. So Catia Coelho is the co-founder and chief innovation officer of Nutreat. So can you share a little bit about your founding journey, and then we'll go to our next panelist.
Yes, sure. Can you hear me? Yeah. I'm Catia. Hello, everyone. First of all, I want to say thank you so much for the Grow New York, for Andrea, for this opportunity. This is a remarkable moment for us. I am the co-founder of Nutreat, along with my partner and husband, Rodolfo. This is remarkable, especially because one of the things that you can see that I'm very excited that we're finalists at the Grow New York. So this is amazing. I am a licensed psychologist in Brazil. I am turned into a mental health clinician, turned now into an entrepreneur. And so this is exciting. All along, I am the mother of 3 amazing kids. They helped us at Nutreat tremendously. And besides that, like any other family, we have health issues such as allergies and other health issues, and diabetes as well. I was born and raised in a family with a history of diabetes, so diabetes, it is a subject very close to my heart. So I understand a bit of the journey, and all that, along with the experience that I had, helped my research, and helped me also, create Nutreat with all my heart. So.
Well, thanks so much for sharing that. And a lot of companies are founded. I know that's where I'm at too, based on personal need. And so super excited to explore topics.
Definitely. Thank you, Andrea.
Excellent. Well, our next panelist is Doug Dresslaer. So full disclosure, my company, SimpliFed, was in Doug's accelerator, which he's going to share a little bit about on this panel. But Doug is the Director of Culture Innovation at Dairy Farmers of America. So Doug, can you share a little bit about your background?
Yeah, absolutely. And this is the first time I've actually seen Andrea in person, so it's great to be here. Thank you for having me. Thank you to Jen and the Grow New York team for inviting me as well. As Andrea mentioned, I work for Dairy Farmers of America, the largest co-op of dairy farmers in the United States. We also are a large producer of consumer goods with over 80 plants manufacturing dairy goods, from gallons of milk to yogurt and cottage cheeses and cheese and all things in between. In my role at DFA has sort of two parts to it. My team is in charge of creating innovation programs for our employees, which in the last year has grown to more than 20,000. And we do that through different sessions that we work with teams on brainstorming ideas and getting innovation out into the dairy industry. The other part of the job, as Andrea mentioned, is we run an accelerator every year. It's a typical accelerator in that it's a 3-month program, but we focus on ag tech and dairy-based food products in this program. The goal of the program is to create long-term relationships with the startups that we select, so that after the program, it's not thank you, goodbye, it's all right, now let's get to work. We've been very fortunate to have some Grow New York finalists come through our program, including Capro X, who's here somewhere out there. Last year, one of the final Super Frau was in the competition. So we love this program, and we love the focus on ag tech and getting technology out to the industry, and that's what we focus on through our accelerator as well.
Oh, excellent. So thrilled to have you here and get to meet you in person.
Yes.
And last but certainly not least, we have Somak Chattopadhyay, who's the founder and managing partner of Armory Square Ventures. And he has an incredible background as an investor, understands the space and arena, but I'll turn it over to you to share a little bit more about your background.
Thank you, Andrea. And also, can people hear me? Good? Okay. We're thrilled to be at today's event. Excited about this panel, and we're big fans of Grow New York as well. Armory Square Ventures, we are a seed and Series A venture fund with offices in upstate New York. Actually, one of our offices just 2 blocks away, but we also have an office in New York City and partners spread across New York and the Midwest. Typically lead seed and Series A rounds, writing checks anywhere from $500,000 on the low end up to $12 million in the case of one of our companies that went public earlier this year, over the life up to the IPO. We have invested in 4 companies just over the last few years in the food and ag tech space, so we're really excited about investing in companies that are addressing all areas of the food supply chain, from the growers and the wholesalers to the distributors and ultimately retailers and consumers. Some of our exits include Bento Box, which just was announced a few weeks ago, acquired by Fiserv, Good Uncle, acquired by Aramark. Real Eats is a new investment that we did. It was past Grow New York winner. We're one of the larger investors and helped the CEO recruit the president and put together this most recent round, a $16 million Series A round. Big fans of Dan, Eric, and Rebecca and the team. So looking forward to talking more about our views on investing in the space.
Well, wonderful. Well, thank you all for being here. So let's dig in. And Somak, I'm going to put you on the hook first with this question, because you're seeing a lot of trends across the arena. And hooray, whoop whoop, in New York State, about 17% of farmers are selling direct to consumer. Just to put that in perspective, the national average is in the 6% range. And so New York State is a leader in that, almost triple what the national average is at. And obviously, after the tailwinds of the pandemic and this crisis that we've been in, there's just been this accelerant of more direct-to-consumer. So can you share a little bit about what you've seen with the companies you've worked with and invested in, or just in general in the arena of the pros and the cons of going direct-to-consumer?
Sure thing. Yeah, no, it's I mean, as I'm sure many of you have seen, either as entrepreneurs or people, consumers, you know, obviously the pandemic was a major tailwind for digital transformation, a lot of industries, including food. So in terms of direct-to-consumer, you know, I will say as a venture fund, we actually tend to shy away usually from direct-to-consumer. The one category where we have, however, made multiple bets in D2C is in the food space. And so in terms of like the pros and cons of being in the D2C space, the pros are, of course, is that you're obviously getting rid of a bunch of different intermediaries kind of on the supply chain, and you ultimately are developing a direct relationship with the consumer. That's a very positive thing, and there's also, you're not worrying about necessarily sharing all those parts of the revenues with all those different constituents. You own the customer. The cons, I guess, is that, you know, it is an extremely competitive space. You know, when you're looking as an entrepreneur about scaling a brand, you know, right now, for the time being, you know, Google and Facebook and, you know, maybe a few other platforms are really kind of the majority of the paid advertising in this industry. So you're competing with people who have raised tons of capital, larger CPG brands. So you're really, if you're pursuing a D2C model, it's really important, we can talk more about this later, about having people on your team early on who understand customer acquisition and building companies that are tech-enabled in this space.
Yeah, and I know we have a whole bunch of founders here, so finding that complement. I'm technical, so I need those customer acquisition experts around my person at all times. So Doug, what are the trends that you're seeing related to direct-to-consumer? From your perspective, what are some of the pros and cons?
Yeah, so initially, of course, everyone had some supply chain issues when it came, you know, to the pandemic and keeping things on shelves, and we obviously saw the increase of online. I think McKinsey had a study in 2020 that the dairy customers they surveyed, it was a 163% increase in people who said that they were buying dairy online. So obviously we've had to adjust, you know, getting product out, getting it to the stores, getting it to the shelves. And we see some of our farmer owners that are the members of our co-op actually doing that as well. You know Seth at the Modern Milkman, a good example of, we do go get his milk every day, but he takes some of that and he offers it as a part of a home subscription model that we've seen grow over the last few years. And he sources regional products. So it's his milk, it's regionally made products, and it's on your doorstep. I think he says something that you can have my milk at your house in 24 hours. So we've seen a lot of that growth. But I think the online purchasing when it comes to, you know, being able to ship dairy, keep it fresh, keep it watching the shelf life, will continue to grow, and we'll see adjustments in our supply chain to do so.
Amazing. Yeah, there's definitely that consumer demand, and we're all so much more aware of that now. Well, Catia, from the founder perspective, can you speak about the pros and cons of direct-to-consumer from your perspective?
Yeah, I think for sure it's going to be hard for farmers and other upstream actors to do direct-to-consumer. It can be very expensive, and but on the other hand, I think it's a great opportunity to collaborate, and could be a win-win for both sides. So I'm a big fan of Rio Eats. They are already doing that. They are collaborating with farmers, local farmers, and they are able to connect Rio Eats with the farmers and with consumers as well. I think that's another collaboration is a great opportunity for both sides as well in this case.
Absolutely, and especially in this region, we're stronger together. So.
Yes, absolutely. Yep.
Well, while I have you, want to move on to the next topic. So we dove in, started talking about direct-to-consumer trends because of the tailwinds of what's happening during and after the pandemic. But I'd like to take it up a notch to a higher level conversation of, what are the current trends that you're seeing in your respective arenas surrounding consumer demand and consumer interest? So Catia, I'll go to you first.
Yeah, that's a great question, and I want to share with you one of my research on a hot topic, food as medicine. At Nutreat, we slice and dice this subject, and you can see food as medicine to treat health issues or to prevent them. So, and we decided to think of preventive nutrition. So, and specifically in nutrition, we decided to look into sugar management. As we know, sugar could be a source of chronic diseases such as diabetes and obesity. And one way that we could get out of the health care crisis we are facing is through prevention and through nutrition in this case. So, and I think one of the things about the sugar management that I mentioned is the lack of information. So one of the best metrics that we could use that could help us understand the impact of carbs in a food serving that will impact our body before we eat is glycemic load, which is a measure of quality and quantity in a food serving. And that's why at Nutreat we decided to put the glycemic load front and center, the numbers of glycemic load of each product front and center on our packaging.
And just out of curiosity, where can they find that? Where can they go to buy that if they were interested?
You can buy them at Nutreat.com or Amazon. And also, we are starting a partnership with Real Eats as well, and soon other options as well. So stay tuned.
Excellent. Well, ABC always be ABS always be selling. Wonderful. Well, Doug, what are the current trends that you're seeing in the dairy arena and beyond?
Well, exactly as you mentioned, you know, food as medicine has become very big in our industry as well. You talk about gut health and probiotics. We are seeing a huge growth in, you know, clean labels. I don't know if you've seen this, but recently the Milk PEP organization, in conjunction with the FDA, discovered that milk now has 13 key nutrients in it. It used to be 9. So given that, and given that milk is literally 3 ingredients, milk, vitamin A and vitamin D, plus the nutrients, it's becoming more of considered a way to hydrate, a way to be healthy when it comes to fluid milk. When you look at other dairy products, we're seeing, you know, clean labels. Sustainability is an issue with a lot of consumers. You know, what are you doing to make our planet better? And of course, traceability. Where did this product come from? Are you able to say, okay, this farm 30 miles down the street produced this product, and people want to know where it's coming from. So we're seeing a lot of that, but I think the food is health, mental health, and exercise and all of that has really grown in the pandemic. And you know, dairy sales were up 22% during the pandemic. The only thing that beat us was frozen foods and alcohol. So I think people were getting back to that feel-good comfort food that some dairy products can provide, but also being able to find those that have the high protein, the low sugar, so they know what they're giving their family at home. And so that's what we're seeing mostly right now, and people are going for those. The other trend that we're seeing grow, now that the pandemic is lessening a bit, is the grab and go. So high protein, nutrient-packed dairy products that parents can grab quickly for their kids to go to soccer practice or to school, and the increase in the use of chocolate milk as a hydrator for runners and things like that. So I think the sort of the balance between health and the nutrients in our products is what we're seeing currently.
Yeah, well, I can speak from personal experience. Before we went on stage, I was literally pulling out packets of food from my pockets for that reason for my 3-year-old this morning on the way to take care. Well, speaking of trends in the investment community, and I can speak from experience in speaking with investors, the food as medicine trend keeps coming up in conversations with investors. So what are you seeing in terms of current trends among the investment community?
Sure. No, what's so interesting about investing in food is that, you know, you touch upon multiple adjacent industries. So we've talked about healthcare. Actually, when I think of Release, one of the things that really got us excited about ultimately investing was I actually thought of it more as a future of work company. As we started actually using Release initially we said, look, let's see if we can help the entrepreneur recruit a president. But we started tasting the items, we saw how fresh it was, no preservatives, and we saw how we could integrate it into our workflow now that we're all working, at that time especially working remotely, and the idea that I could start to do conference calls. I was maybe a little too casual in my meetings, but I would start just opening up the bag and start cooking my lunch while I could do my Zoom calls. And I think I realized it wasn't just me. I looked at moms, like working moms who normally had to worry about going somewhere to pick up food, the idea that this could actually completely fundamentally transform their lives. So I think of in many ways also not just an exciting food and distribution company, but also the future of food, a future of work rather. The other area that we have been seeing a lot of interesting opportunities is in the area of figuring out how to do last mile delivery, supply chain logistics. I mean, we've all seen during the pandemic how challenged people are because of constraints in the supply chain. So software tools that help create more transparency and more reliability within the supply chain. The area of doing something that also has a positive environmental impact, so lessening your carbon footprint or lessening reliance on the cold chain, extending the shelf life of products, has applications not only in the US but also in the developing world, and those are things that we find very, very exciting.
Excellent. Well, I love the call out to working moms. We run the world, so
right.
Hooray, hooray to that. We're also big consumers as well, on trend for the panel. So I'm a visiting faculty member at the S.G. Johnson College of Business, and one of the things at the Johnson School that they do is they have faculties make prediction of the future, and it's a big thing with the alumni community, what's going to happen in the future. And so not going to hold y'all to it, but I am curious to hear your predictions in the CPG market. And so, Doug, I'll start with you. So what are your predictions? And in a year, or 2 years, or 5 years, maybe we'll see who won.
Yeah, great. This will be recorded, right? So I think what we're going to see in the dairy industry are that'll be future trends are the ones that we see currently, and they'll get more defined. So when you talk about sustainability and everything from packaging to a carbon footprint, we have a very large supply chain. How do we reduce that carbon footprint in that? And I think consumers are looking to see that in the story of a product they buy, whether it's, if you've heard about neutral milk that's trying to get to carbon zero type production of milk, or packaging that is much more than just recyclable but reusable, that increases shelf life. Things like that I think will stay. We actually had a company in one of our accelerator classes that can spin unused milk into fabrics, and now working with Ambev in China and all kinds of things for packaging for food. So I think that's going to really grow. And I think the other thing that we'll see more of is traceability. Not just from a food safety standpoint, which is also very important, and food security in the supply chain, but also just the idea that where that food product came from, where did it start, how did it get here, and then also to be able to trace it back and say, hey, there was a problem here. Where did this start, and how do you fix it? I think the eating at home that grew so much during the pandemic will continue, but I think the food as health, more probiotic, more gut health will continue to grow, and we're seeing that in a lot of the companies that we're looking at, these early food startup companies that we bring into our program. The other one I'll say real quick is that we've seen recently is the use of other products that are created in the process of milk. So I mentioned Capro X. They're taking acidic whey and they're turning it into biofuels. We had 3 companies in that same class using whey, which is a byproduct of cheese, making beverages, making hydration beverages. One company actually making a very delicious distilled beverage out of whey. And so I think we'll see a lot more of that, a utilization of byproducts. And then one more thing I'll say will be the carbon footprint on the farm with the use of digesters and taking water usage more important in their daily farming, so that they're able to say, we are doing these practices on our farm, and that becomes a message as they sell that product out to consumers.
Well, excellent. And so, Catia, what do you think?
I think when I see, remember the glycemic load that I mentioned right here to you guys? Imagine if we, with the advance of the continuous glucose monitor that people have here, imagine if they have the blood sugar level right here in the watch. So Fitbit already announced a couple of research that they are doing. So imagine if we could see that right here in the watch. So that's what I see the future. So everybody's gonna have informed consent, and they're gonna be able to make decisions, better decision for when they're eating. So, and this is gonna help a lot reduce some, for instance, the diabetes epidemic that we are facing nowadays. That's what I see, the coupling, food with technology. So.
Oh, huge impacts at a tremendous scale. So, well, wonderful. Well, Somak, what are the bets that you would make? Where do you see the future going?
Yeah, I mean, I think I've learned through, being a VC for a bunch of years, I feel we're not the ones typically predicting the future, but we are excited to be able to spend a lot of time with early innovators and seeing what they're working on so that those could be market leaders in the future. So when I spend time at Cornell Ag School and just other, some of the Grow New York companies that have presented to us and other companies we're seeing across upstate, it's just fascinating what some of these entrepreneurs are doing in terms of, coming up with new products that could be, in the case of the D2C category, many people were obviously inspired by Hamdi at Chobani, and are saying that if you look at between Chobani as well as Ithaca Hummus, which is close to, I know where you live, I mean, there's been some incredible market-leading companies that have been built here, and I think they're going to see more of those being built here in New York State, and hopefully a few Grow New York companies will become those next market leaders. I mean, I think something else that we find really interesting is the opportunity for to kind of just help these large, massive retailers and distributors be able to work more with some of the local suppliers. So you mentioned Real Eats is doing that already with farms in Geneva. But one thing that I find just so fascinating is that these large players like the Albertsons of the world, the Giants, the Wegmans, they've always cared about growing, the ecosystem, but I'm seeing more of them being strategic investors and trying to incubate the new companies and being early pilot customers. And I think that will continue to grow. And I think that's one other thing I would say as a trend we'll see continuing is that you're going to see, I think venture capital will always have an important role to play, including in CPG, but most of my peers tend to shy away from CPG industry. They think of it as a different industry. It's not enough software. They don't like that business as much. But I think that void is being filled by numerous other strategic investors, which I think you'll only continue to see growing over the next few years.
Yeah, and speaking of leading the industry with Wegmans, they've always been so focused on creating an incredible customer experience, driven by, of course, their work experience related to your future work comments earlier. That's as right. Well. Well, on the trends of New York State, two of the products that sadly have been falling out of favor with consumers have been on the dairy side and maple syrup. And in particular on the dairy side, there has been this interest on plant-based products. And so, Doug, what are your thoughts on that, and how is the dairy industry innovating and being pioneers and creating opportunities based on what's happening in the market right now?
Yeah, I mean, we have to be just aware of what consumers want, and we have experimented with a beverage that was half plant beverage and half milk, and tried that out to see what consumers would think about that. In dairy, we say it's not just a gallon of milk anymore, it's everything else that is on the shelf. But obviously, we want to keep up on those trends and provide our consumers what they want. But if you look at the plant versus a gallon of milk, the labels on the milk are much cleaner, the nutrients are there, the calcium is there, and the protein. And so I think that we'll see continued challenges from the alternatives. But again, if we are able to provide a nutritious product, whether that's a cup of yogurt or a slice of cheese, I think people will still be able to understand the health benefits of a quality dairy product. But again, we keep our eyes out, and we have great relationships with a lot of the companies that are producing those other beverages. And as the consumer need increases, they'll probably see growth as well. But dairy is up, and I think that the nutrition value is a lot behind that. To help with the maple syrup side, a couple hours east of here is the Boxler family dairy. They also have a maple syrup farm, and you can they're utilizing all the trees that have been on their property for decades. And so not only do they milk 5,200 head of cow a day, they are producing maple syrup. Look up Boxler maple syrup. You can buy it online. So there's a little mashup of dairy and syrup. And in New York. So mic drop.
You're like, I'm done here.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for sharing that. And DFA has been such a leader and for decades and decades and decades. So just so excited to see where the market is going there. So one of the common questions that entrepreneurs have is, how do you get your initial traction? And especially in the D2C space, there's often the worry of the cold start problem, where perhaps you've done some initial testing, but how do you get that initial traction? So I'm going to go first to our founder on the panel. So what advice do you have for entrepreneurs and how to get initial traction?
Get the initial traction. I'm not going to lie, it's not easy, but it's possible. And I think one of the things that we have to have in mind is to go for our smaller target audience that you can connect with. And another thing is that one of the opportunities we found actually has been to being mission driven. I think when you find partners that have the same mission, a genuine mission that comes from your heart, I think that's very helpful. So in our case, we could able to collaborate with children with diabetes, and it has been an amazing opportunity to connect with those managing diabetes and connect with their journey. So I think that's phenomenal. So I think that's an option and that's what I would say for those that would help those, in the same, journey that we are as a small company entrepreneur, actually.
Absolutely. Who has that most urgent need, that most painful need, and lean into that.
Yep.
And so on the investor side, what are you seeing in terms of companies? How do they get initial traction? But also, what are the growth hacks that you're seeing on the consumer side?
Yeah, no, I mean, it feels like we see thousands of companies every year, but I mean, a subset of that is obviously in the food category. And that's probably one of my favorite categories because all of us, I know I can speak for myself, I love food, I love eating, I love being in upstate, and I love being able to merge those interests with technology investing. I mean, I think one of the most important things is, especially if you're creating a consumer-facing product, although same thing applies to B2B, is getting enough early, getting some early signs, of product market fit before you start thinking of raising larger rounds. I don't know how many of you have seen that video that it demonstrates product market fit with the baby in the ice cream cone. She's like, I think they're showing this baby girl gets ice cream for the first time. She grabs the ice cream cone and she won't let go of it, right? Like just like, that's an example of product market fit, which is unbelievable. And I think a bunch of entrepreneurs think that you can just create an interesting product, but once you start raising around, you start investing in marketing, suddenly it'll sell like crazy. I mean, the reality is if you have massive product market fit, and you need to have a statistically significant data set, it can't just be 3 or 4 of your family members, it has to be enough people who can tell you that this is really something that is amazing. Well, then the reality is that we're seeing this with numerous CPG companies. They're getting inbounds from the larger retailers saying, we'd like to actually resell, distribute, private label your product. I mean, that's one thing I would say is very important. For B2B, I mean, the same thing applies, right? You want to get a few anchor customers, maybe piloting and making sure that, that there is enough evidence that this could scale before you raise the next round. I've already touched upon the fact that you should early on think about investing in people who understand technology and customer acquisition. I see a lot of entrepreneurs who, especially in the food industry, although I see this in other industries too, who think of technology as a cost center, but don't realize that you're not going to be able to build a $100 million revenue business just operating off of Squarespace or Shopify. The reality is if you want to compete head-on with other players, you are going to have to invest with someone who understands the architecture of tech companies and scale, and that's how you can create scale and moat. And marketing and customer acquisition is also a very important skill set, and I think a lot of people think I can just outsource that to an agency, and then that'll, I'll bring that person on in the Series C or beyond, but I think it's important to have that DNA in the team early on.
Absolutely. Bing, bang, boom, a miracle happens, not so fast. Oh.
Yeah.
Well, Doug, so what are you seeing? How are companies in your portfolio getting initial traction or growth hacking their way to success?
Well, it kind of goes back to what he was saying about, knowing, having the well-rounded team, knowing the problem you're solving. Even with a consumer product, we had a company that's in the sports drink industry. You're going up against massive giants, but know the problem you're solving, and you do start to get the outreach. Understand distribution, understand how hard it is to get on shelves, and figure out a way to either do that or another channel, whether it's direct to consumer or through your website, whatever it may be. But you need to be able to tell a great story behind your product, and that will sell just as much as if you've got the lowest amount of sugar and the highest amount of protein. Your story itself can really get you traction. And I think from an investor standpoint, we've seen that companies that are really watching their cost of goods, understanding how a supply chain works, really pique the interest of investors more so than just the product, right? And of course, team. It always goes back to team for me, knowing the technical side, the consumer side, how to raise money, and getting that validation from more than just